Hey, what's up everyone? This is MASTERIA, and in this tutorial I'm going to show you how me and my friend AceMyth made our track Do It, which was recently released on Tchami's Confession label. So we're getting some great DJ support from guys like Tchami, Tiesto, Zeds, Morgan Page, Fetty Legrand, and a bunch of other remarkable DJs. We're going to break it down layer by layer and kind of show you how it came to be, what we started with, how we progressed it from there, kind of how we built what the track is today. And not only that, we're also going to be giving away all of the samples and presets we use in the song for free. So you can head down to the description and check that out. There'll be a link there. But other than that, if you guys have any questions on any part of this song, let us know in the comments below and I'll be happy to answer them for you. But other than that, let's get into it.
All right, cool. So here we are in Ableton, and as I mentioned before, AceMyth and I initially planned to do this tutorial together in person, but with all this craziness going on in the world, we are practicing social distancing, and we're going to be bringing this one to you virtually. So we'll be going through all of the layers in this, discussing some of the processing, and we thought we'd do it in the way that the track kind of came together, so you can learn how we kind of got to this result. And just a reminder, all of these samples and presets will be available for free download. Just check the link in the description below. But AceMyth had initially started this track. He sent me the initial idea, so I thought I'd let him talk a little bit about some of the first elements he began with and kind of how he progressed it from there.
Yeah, so the track started with the drums. That's usually how I start building tracks most of the time, is by finding a really good kick, a really good clap, a really good hi-hat, and just paying very close attention to the sample selection, making sure that I'm starting with really high quality samples that are already very well mixed, and then recombining them and auditioning different kicks and snares, and just getting everything right before I really move forward from there.
For sure. So we have these main drum sounds going, just these short, nice, transient-y kicks and claps, like super short. And one thing you'll notice is kick is like especially tight, and that's because we just have so much bass, so many other sounds going on. The kick is just in there and it's out. Like sometimes I'll hear it in sounds where they'll let the kick tail go too long. And you can see AceMyth chop the tail in this one to kind of shorten it up. So be conscious of your kick length, because those low end frequencies can mess up your mix. So these are just simple, just kick and clap. But what AceMyth was talking about there is like some of these really swung percussion. That's what really helps get this thing moving. So here are the drums and the percussion groups played together. Then the beat section. So this is that super swing that he was talking about. Initially, he just had these notes all the same length, but then once you apply the swing over here on the left, this groove pool, and then, so that's what you would do. And then he pressed commit, and you can see that it swung them even more, moves it even more. So this is what it looks like with that groove already committed. That second note moves over a lot, and that helps things sound a lot less robotic, a lot more like funky and interesting, because when things are just dun, 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 it's robotic, it's not that interesting or dynamic, but moving things off the grid can be really powerful. So once again, here's what those two drum groups sound like in this A section and the B section. So you can see in this percussion section, we have some hats, some open hats, more hat layers, not on the first hit, but on these other hits to help accentuate it after that first drop. Some of these little closed hats, that percussion we just showed, and then just some additional loops just to add a little more character and help fill things out. And this is one loop AceMyth added that I thought was super dope. Do you use a lot of effects loops in your tracks?
Yes, I love to make like a very strong foreground layer where a lot of the elements are really pushed out at the listener, and then I love to make a very subtle background layer with using like effects loops and using little like ghosts. They sound almost like ghostly vocals, and that just creates like a depth in the song and it really helps make the foreground elements seem like they're sticking out even further.
Totally. Adds a little context for them. So that's what this is. And then we just have some other little hits in here tucked in, almost like fills. Little tom action. And that's about it for the drop section. And then just going over to the drum section in the build. Here's what that sounds like. So when AceMyth and I started making this track, we knew we wanted it to be a club track, a DJ-friendly track. And one thing that really helps with DJs playing your tracks is always having some sort of groove going. You know, when people on the dance floor, if they don't hear any drums or any kind of percussion or anything keeping them going, people kind of like, you can see it as a DJ, people kind of stop moving and they aren't really sure what to do. So if you always, especially in house tracks, if you always have some sort of thing going, it kind of keeps them moving and shows them the tempo and the rhythm of the song. So that's why we have always some sort of percussion playing, carrying it in this first break. Just a little loop, nothing too crazy. Slowly being filtered up, less reverb and all that stuff. So here's how we did that automation, just automating the dry wet of the reverb down, as well as opening up the filter. So it starts at, we're cutting everything above about 7 kilohertz and then opens all the way up. So just these slight changes in the filter and the dry wet of certain sounds, all these things are pretty subtle, but these fine details help add a lot of movement in a song, and listeners can subconsciously feel that things are progressing and moving and not just the exact same. So that's what we did there. And you'll notice there's a ton of stuff frozen because we're tight on CPU here. So we want this to be as glitch free for you guys as possible. And then here is the build. So we have So this one, we honestly just did it was like a little snare build loop that we probably kept in there as a placeholder. I'll do that sometimes, but it ended up sounding so good that we kept it in. And that's what samples are for. And on top of that, we layered, I think AceMyth, you did these clicks on top of it. This little click loop, and then at the end, we just had another snare filtering up. So just a lot of drums kind of coming in, and it just builds the energy. So
Pitching up too.
Yep. So let's see. This one's probably already pitched, but
Yeah.
That's about it on the drums and percussion. Let's see. As the drop progresses, we layered in a couple more things. You know, just some more subtle layers, just to show the listener that you're building on top of what was in the previous section each time by a little bit, just to add a little more energy, a little more interest, keep things dynamic. But that's about it for the drums and percussion. And Alex, I think what you did next was you started working on some of the synths in that first break. Is that right?
Yeah, we had originally I was inspired by this sample that I just had looping, and it had a certain kind of funky minor chord progression to it. And we ended up taking that out. We used a small sample from it.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I sent it to you, you worked a lot on making that intro and break the sort of respace that comes in. And also at that point, we started to add a little a loop that sort of, that's basically when we added the effects loops in.
Yeah, and we had that pad loop going.
Yeah, the pad loop.
Yeah, so he mentioned the Reese and the pad loop. Here's what those sound like together. you guys probably recognize that. That's kind of the bulk of the break. Those are definitely the main sounds.
And that establishes the theme of the song, other than the drop theme.
Yeah. And on top of that, we just did some other stuff just to give it some space. Yeah, just some airy chords. You know, just kind of, like I said, give it the space and atmosphere. Some kind of spacey hits. Here's what that whole section sounds like together. Each one of these is kind of being filtered up a little bit. I don't want to unfreeze these because there's a lot of CPU stuff going on. But I'm using, like you can see here, this low pass. I'm filtering this one up from the last part of like the intro. Kind of introducing that Reese. And that, once again, just doing some small filter modulations, things like that can really help not only introduce some of these elements into your song in a really cool, clean way, but it also helps keep things moving and evolving. And that was about it for the synths right there. A couple brass hit right here. Let's see, where is that? You know, nothing crazy, just some reverses into it. Pretty simple stuff. But our favorite part of the song is definitely the drop, some of these basses. So let's get into that. With this track, as I'd mentioned, this kind of started as an idea that AceMyth sent me. And so he had a lot of these basses already in place. It was kind of he had a full drop made, but we ended up switching up this first section. So here's what just the drop basses sound like. So when he sent it to me, this second section was pretty much already hashed out. And here it is with that flute on top as well. 1 second. So let's start with that bass, because that was one of the first sounds in the song. And is this one, was that made in Reactor?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is made in Reactor Monarch.
Nice. And then you just bounced it out?
Yep, because Reactor takes up a bunch of CPU, and not everybody has Reactor. So
AceMyth had that bass, and then you had this flute going over top. I'm pulling that up right now. It was a quick sample initially. And then the A section starts off just with this growl, and that's just a growl I made. Like I'll just have these sound design sessions where I'll add tons of processing on top of usually Serum, and just, you know, just experiment, just have fun, no idea what's gonna come out, what the result's gonna be. And then you just get all these crazy basses. You know, I'll record the whole thing and then chop them up, and then I just have this whole library of super processed, distorted basses and sounds that no one else has that I like. So you can just plug them right into the song. So that's what I did here. I had this little main layer dry, and then I put a layer on the sides, which I just processed like crazy, glue, OTT, trash. Oh, OTT is not working there. And then speaking of Haas Effect, I did that, but I did some mid-side EQ, a little bit of vocoder, and then I layered that on top of that other one and brought the volume down. So you can just hear the width and the fullness that adds. Under that, I have just a little sine wave, just because like in these tracks, you always want to make sure that your low end stays pretty consistent and that each sound doesn't have different low end. Otherwise, things won't be as cohesive. So we have that. A little reverse going into this section. Subtle stuff here. And then here are those basses. So what this is 3 layers. It's just pretty much a saw bass, 2 basic shapes, one minus oscillator A minus 1 octave, and this one just at 0. Not too much processing either. I mean, a good amount of processing, but it pretty much just kind of sounds like a song. So I have this main layer. Once again, just a bunch of processing on this other layer, then I widen it up. Same, more mid-side EQ. And then just some white noise, help fill it out. And then afterwards, some EQ, or some multi-band compression, some EQ, just taming those highs a lot, because we knew we were going to have those synths coming in the high end, so we brought some of those down just to make room for those like leads right on top of it. Some saturation. We really went hard on the processing on this one. More multi-band compression, more EQ, and then some LFO tool. So this is really useful for chopping it up into notes. Here's what that looks like. That really helped kind of give it some rhythm, you know? And then on top of that, we have this lead, which on its own doesn't sound that, you know, anything crazy, but on top of that bass, it just works. So here's what's going on there. Minus 2 octaves, BSOD square, and then just a default saw here, also minus 2. Little bit of processing. A lot of FM. That's what's really going on here. Is FM right here. And then this one, same kind of patch, but I brought this up 2 octaves instead of minus 2, just to give it some more high end. We didn't use that 3rd layer. And then process them together. Some glue, Camel Crusher, some amp. The amp is doing a lot here. And I put it in mono to really just have that tight stereo image, that tight, yeah, just make everything really nice and fit together in the middle there. A little bit of decapitator afterwards. And then some ridiculous EQ. Captator, a little bit of reverb. I think we just use some, maybe this, yeah, so in the build, we just automated the reverb down. I'll talk about that build in a second. And then we did the same kind of thing. So let's see. So it's just this LFO. I mean, we could have used LFO tool, we use Shaper Box here. That's what gives it the rhythm. It's a sustained signal from the synth, but then we used these external kind of LFO things to give it the rhythm. So much different. Yeah, and that's about the bulk of it. But another really cool thing to note that I think people don't do enough is use these pitch bends. That's what really helps this one move. So here it is without any pitch bends. Really boring. And here it is with those pitch bends. So then this sound, this is just a resample of that synth above. So here's what that sounded like before I pitched it down. And I like to play with these warp modes a lot. I use Complex Pro in this one, and then envelope all the way up and brought the formants down a little bit, which can just, when you play with those, it can, each one gives you a slightly different result. So we have this one, just some EQ, and then I added a wide layer. Yep, wideness, little mid-side EQ. And then in between these, we just have like some other just random basses, just keep things moving. You know? So then we just layered these few little bass samples together to give this cool like phrase right before the next section. Here's what that sounds like. you know, and we just experimented. We layered a bunch of them together that didn't work, moved stuff around. And so a lot of this is just like throwing stuff at the wall and just seeing what sounds good. And if you keep trying this stuff, eventually you'll be doing something and you'll be like, wow, that sounds way doper than I even thought it could, you know? So that's how this came about. And that's about it for this bass section. Here's what these two sound like together. And then we do a little bit of variation on this drop over here. I'll just go through those layers quickly because there's just a lot of stuff. This is another bass. I think you made this one in Reactor as well. Alex?
Yeah, pretty much everything that I put in this song was from Reactor.
Yeah. And then we have this going over. Yeah, this is like LFO tool thing. Did I make this one? Yeah, so here's just this little cool one I made and just put it on top. Yeah. Once again, if you guys want these presets, instead of copying them, just head down to the comments. We're giving them all away for free download, so check those out. And let me see, is there anything else in this drop section? Last thing on the drop that I do in almost every song is like, especially when you have a crazy drop like this, it can be really useful to introduce the sounds and the phrasing in the build. So it's like you're teasing it and people hear it coming. It's like, oh, what's that sound? You know, what is that rhythm? So by the time it actually comes, it's a little bit more familiar. Whereas if you don't do that, sometimes people can like, instead of diving into the groove and like dancing, it almost like hits them so much by surprise that they're not, you know, they're not sure what to do. So it can be really cool to introduce some of the main elements in your drop during the build. And speaking of the build, here's what we had going on for vocals.
Yeah.
So kind of some airy yeah chants.
I'ma do it to him. Yeah. I'ma do it to him. Do it to him. I'ma do it to him. Do it to him. I'ma do it to him.
So there's not a ton of crazy stuff going on with these vocals here. I would really love to unfreeze these for you guys, but if I do, this project won't work anymore. So
How many channels do we have?
How many channels are in this one total?
Yeah, it was beastly.
And we cut this down like crazy. 196. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was after trimming many away.
Yeah. Which is too much. There's nothing cool about having a lot of channels. You know, just it creates more problems.
We could barely finish the project by the time it was done.
I run into that problem a lot. But yeah, so nothing crazy.
I'ma do it.
I mean, we're just kind of taking little pieces of the vocal, adding some reverb in certain sections, just kind of teasing it and just having it be playful, like someone's kind of having a conversation with you over the course of the build. Now let's dive into, and then we also use little pieces of the vocal in the drop, which I think is super cool. You know, this one's pitched down, 12 semitones, you know, so just teasing little pieces of it, of your vocal in the drop is super cool. And like, yeah, the more vocal stuff you can do, we humans just love those vocal elements. So yeah. And we have some atmospheres. Let's see. Yeah, we just have some crowd noise going on in the drop. This just kind of helps make it helps make things seem more epic. It's almost like a crowd cheering. Like it's almost like you drop it at a show and there's some background noise. People be like, "Yeah, this is sick!" You know, it's a cool way to add some excitement and like epicness to your drops.
Classic.
Yeah. And this final section, the effects. So I'm gonna play this so you can hear what's going on. I'll scroll through it. Impacts, some sweeps, lasers and zaps. So yeah, just some impacts, crashes, and some reverses. Nothing that complex in the build. But then in the drop, here's what the effects sound like. So we have that pad going, which is just kind of adding some like ambience to everything, and then we have just this kind of like siren-y atmospheric thing. We got these alarms, and I think we both really fell in love with using alarms in this track. At least I did. Like, they just add such a cool like apocalyptic, crazy kind of vibe to anything, and so we really like kind of the energy that was added to the track in this section. And then we had this, yeah, just white noise to help fill things out and just carry everything. Here's that ambience, and then in this second section, just some chants and stuff like that. Another alarm we layered. Yeah, this horn here. Sweeps, bringing you into the next transition. All these sounds are just kind of things to help fill stuff out and give context to how cool the elements are in the middle of the mix. Like, if you don't, it's like I saw Kashmir talking about one time. He was like, if there's like a painting of a mountain, the mountain doesn't seem that, can never seem that big if you don't paint in all the little trees at the bottom and all these things. So without all these little details, you can't fully appreciate, you know, the full picture, you know, without the context. So
Alright guys, that is it. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you had as much fun as I did. And I hope you learned something from this. If you haven't yet, there's that link in the description. Download all of the samples and presets for free. Definitely recommend you do that. And I just want to say thank you for watching, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.